We don't smoke marijuana in Muskogee, or do they? Next on One Nation. Hello, America. Welcome to One Nation. I'm your host, Dr. Jake Jacobs. You know, I can remember during World War II, or let me put it this way. During World War II, my mother was called Lovely Lady of Song. And she used to proudly say, you know, I once had an audition with Lawrence Welk. Now, if you don't know who Lawrence Welk is, he was an older gentleman who was an orchestra, who headed up an orchestra. And he used to had a show on ABC from 1955 to 1971. Well, it was in 1971 when Lawrence Welk had Gale and Dale sing one of Brewster and Shipley's 1971 song called One Toke Over the Line. Now, the singers Gale and Dale and Lawrence Welk, they didn't have a clue that toke was an expression about smoking a marijuana joint or Mary Jane, cannabis, ganja, whatever they call it nowadays. So I want you to take a listen to this young couple singing One Toke Over the Line, and they don't have a clue it's about marijuana. Here goes.
One toke over the line, sweet Jesus, one toke over the line. Sitting downtown in a railway station, one toke over the line. Waiting for the train that goes home, sweet Mary, hoping that the train is on time. Sitting downtown in a railway station, one toke over the line.
Every time I see it, I can't believe it. Gale and Dale, they're singing One Toke. They haven't got a clue. This is 1971, people. This is the height of the counterculture and marijuana, pot, and all this. And they're sitting there. And what's really additionally funny is that Lawrence Welk, now I'm not ripping on Lawrence Welk. My mom adored him, right? You know, I got auditioned by Lawrence Welk. She thought she'd get on the show. She never did, but that was, her badge of honor for her. But Lawrence comes at the end of the song and he says, there you've heard a modern spiritual by Gale and Dale. You've got to hear this. Go ahead.
One toke over the line.
And there you've heard a modern spiritual by Gale and Dale.
I'll tell you, maybe it was spiritual to the people at Woodstock, right, and my generation, but it certainly wasn't Christian spirituality. Now, it's interesting because marijuana or hemp, cannabis, sativa, has a long and fascinating history in world civilization and in America. It came over to America in Jamestown, early 1600s. It was used for rope, for clothes, building materials. It was used throughout the colonies. Even George Washington, it was one of the three main crops that he actually grew on his farm. By the 1850s, marijuana was used for medicinal purposes. Now, it's been used for medicinal purposes throughout history, but it was becoming more used in pharmacies in America. But then a lot of people began to recognize its drug aspects or its recreational aspects. And so by the 1930s, the FDA and the FBM, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, began to say, wait a minute, this cannabis, this marijuana stuff is bad. In fact, the head of the FBN, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, his name was Harry Anslinger. And Harry, his goal was to totally eradicate any marijuana usage in the United States. Now, it's interesting because it normally would be called cannabis or cannabis sativa or hemp and the products thereof, but he specifically chose the term marijuana because that's what the term that was used south of the border. So when a lot of Mexican immigrants would come up into the country and bring marijuana with them, cannabis with them, they called it marijuana. So Harry says, this is what we're going to make sure we label it. It's marijuana and it's evil. So in 1936, the federal government created a movie called Reefer Madness. Reefer Madness, the sweet pill that makes life better. Adults only. And of course, the movie, I can still remember watching it when I was in high school, just blown away at how absolutely funny it was to watch American propaganda in relationship to marijuana. So let's just play a little clip from Reefer Madness, 1936.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes, hidden in an innocent shoe or watch case.
If you want a good smoke, try one of these.
You will meet Bill, who once took pride in his strong will as he takes the first step toward enslavement.
So thus it was Reefer Madness, propaganda by the U.S. government, 1930s. Now, it's interesting because while I'm in this particular case showing the negative aspects of hemp or cannabis sativa, it actually had been used, like I said, for centuries in various cultures throughout the ages. It was used by the colonist George Washington. The United States Navy during World War II had a documentary film called Hemp for Victory. And Wisconsin was one of the big hemp growers in all of the United States. You got a special license, marijuana license or hemp growing license in the state of Wisconsin, other states in this time period. But by 1970, Richard Nixon put cannabis on the Schedule I drug list, and it was equated with heroin, LSD, and other heavy-duty drugs. So 2 tokes in 1 joint, you could literally get 20 years in prison. Now, a lot has happened since 1970. Today, medical marijuana is legal in 38 states, and recreational marijuana is legal in 24 states. Now, I'm not going to argue the merits thereof because, there are enough vices in life to let alone have our young people being involved in recreational marijuana. I think there might be a decent argument for properly regulated medical marijuana. But the problem is that those within the marijuana industry, they recognize how they can work their way around the medical marijuana regulations and use it for recreational purposes. And the communist Chinese understand the incredible demand in the United States for marijuana. Now, remember when Gail and Dale from the song One Toke Over the Line? Well, Gail is from Oklahoma. She's an actual Okie. And who doesn't remember now I got to preface this. It's 1969. Woodstock happens in August thereof, and Merle Haggard, a conservative country singer, comes out with the song Okie from Muskogee. You've got to listen to a short clip of Okie from Muskogee. Here goes.
We don't smoke marijuana in Muskogee. We don't take our trips on LSD. We don't burn our draft cards down on Main Street. We like living right, being free.
I love it. It's a wonderful, country still has a strong vein of conservative Christian values in it. And here's Merle Haggard, and that's saying, we're not doing the drugs, we're not doing marijuana, we're not doing LSD, we're not burning our draft cards. Remember, that song came out at the height of the counter-revolution, Marxist counter-revolution in America, where anything goes. But it's very interesting. It's amazing how much has changed since I was a kid in this time frame. Because ironically today, Muskogee, Oklahoma, population about 37,000, is called the marijuana mecca of the wild west of weed. I'm not kidding you. This city where they proudly says we don't smoke marijuana in Muskogee is now the mecca of marijuana. Well, the reason why is in 2018, the Okies passed a very expansive, unrestricted medical and recreational marijuana law where there are over 12,000 cannabis businesses permeated all throughout Oklahoma. They even call Oklahoma Toklahoma. So but here's an interesting connection. I am dealing with the pervasive spreading of drugs in America. You've heard me talk in other shows about the Chinese, Mexican fentanyl that's spreading throughout America because of the open border policies of Joe Biden, Mayorkas. The Communist Nationalists, the Communist Party, the CCP, once again, like I said earlier, they understand the demand. They want to be the suppliers with the demand side over here. And literally, in the state of Oklahoma, 75% of the business is actually controlled by Chinese nationalists. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But I want you to see a little bit of news dealing with this. Here goes.
Close to 75% of Oklahoma's marijuana farms are owned by Chinese nationals. They're buying up more than 1 million acres in the heartland to grow black market weed.
They come from California, and they come from back east, and I know what they're trying to do. They want to buy some acreage up to put these marijuana farms.
They would advertise on like Mandarin websites saying, come to Oklahoma, grow marijuana, millions of dollars to be made. They partnered with these lawyers and entities who would get them a license.
Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics is racing to smoke them out, so far seizing more than 600,000 pounds of product. Law enforcement says an open southern border is allowing violent cartels to smuggle in workers undetected.
You don't see them because they're not visible. You can set up on a grow house and you might get lucky and see them maybe changing shifts or something, but it's just, they're all inside now.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? They're all inside now. The Communist Chinese recognize it's a Trojan horse, a poisonous Trojan horse, spreading throughout the United States of America because of Biden's ridiculous, evil, open border policy that now is coming close to 8 million illegal aliens in the United States of America. More on that later. By the way, it's very interesting that conservative governors like Governor Abbott of Texas or Governor DeSantis of Florida, they're passing laws saying no longer can the communist Chinese buy up farmland throughout Florida, throughout Texas, they're buying up farmland in Wisconsin, in South Dakota, North Dakota. They're trying to do it in Montana, Wyoming, and some of them are near military bases. There's a reason for that. It's a strategy. It's a multifaceted military strategic strategy by the Communist Party to weaken the United States of America. You know why? Because we are the force. We are the government. We are the nation state. We are the republic, stopping them from achieving their goal by 2049 of being numero uno on the world stage. Let's listen once again to dealing with China's relationship to the overdose deaths in the United States. Here goes.
The source of the fentanyl flooding America's streets might come as a surprise. According to data compiled by the Drug Enforcement Administration, illicit fentanyl is primarily manufactured in China and smuggled into the United States through Mexico. Some say this should constitute an act of war.
Well, we should consider each of those deaths a murder. Because China wanted Americans dead. China knows exactly what's going on. So when they sell fentanyl, you have to assume that this is Communist Party policy.
These experts fear fentanyl may prove to be our adversary's most powerful weapon, defeating America from the inside out.
Every time someone says fentanyl, we should be saying China. Unfortunately, that's not the case.
If our enemies can destroy our youth who fight our wars, then they've already won the battle.
We'll be back for the rest of the story in a moment. Now, did you see what they said? They were, in essence, talking about the influence of communist China. You know, you've heard me talk about the evil Mexican cartel, but they're in collusion with the Communist Party, with dictator Xi. This is we've talked about fentanyl and cannabis, marijuana permeating throughout the country, coming through our southern border. I've seen it literally firsthand. It's why I've done a series called American Crisis at the Border. And here at Freedom Project Media, we're going to have the debut for our first part of the series called American Crisis at the Border, American Lawmen on October 17, 2023, where I interviewed Lieutenant Chris Lepre of the Pinal County Sheriff's Department, and he explains how absolutely deplorable and horrible the Mexican, Chinese, drugs, human sex trafficking is flooding into the United States of America. Now, I think it's so important for us to recognize something, that communist China is an evil virus in many, many ways. A multifaceted evil virus, the CCP virus, I call it. I get a lot of my left-wing friends upset. I actually have a nice picture here of the CCP virus. It shows dictator Xi in the middle with all the Communist Party members. And let me explain what I mean. In 1949, Mao Zedong took over China, and many of the nationalists fled to, back then it was called Formosa, to the island of Formosa, which we now call Taiwan. I think it's a population now of about 25 million people. And Mao Zedong immediately implemented what they called Marxism or communism with Chinese characteristics, meaning they were going to take Marx, Lenin, and to a certain degree, maybe some Stalinism, but primarily Marx and Lenin, and they were going to modify it to to China, and make China the great dictatorship of the proletariat that was going to destroy the bourgeoisie, destroy free enterprise, or what they would call as evil capitalism. And therefore, they were going to implement the perfect utopic society, and that it would spread beyond China all throughout the world, where by the year 2049, China would actually rule the world under a utopic communistic control. Now, this is something I think we need to recognize and understand. That Mao Zedong was the biggest mass murderer in human history. The biggest, bar none. He killed more people than Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin combined. I mean, the killing fields, the slaughterhouses, the thousands of gulags spread throughout communist China. And then in the 1960s, Mao Zedong, after he had implemented his 5-year policies of agricultural control, he literally caused the death of millions and millions of Chinese people. And then in the 1960s, they had a cultural revolution from 1962 to 1976. That's when Mao died. I was in college at the time when he died. I did a happy dance. Mao was a murdering monster. And then along came Chou Enlai and other new communist leaders. And they said something, this pure communism is not working. So what we need to do is we're going to amalgamate for a temporary time period. We're going to actually open up our markets. We're going to actually start to engage in trade across the world. And now, under the leadership of dictator Xi, who's a lifetime dictator, they have the Belt and Road Silk Initiative. They have developed Confucius institutions and American universities. We're under the guise of befriending the United States. They have spies at Harvard and Yale University, and they're stealing our technology. And then in the meantime, they are investing in very poor countries like Bolivia and Argentina, and they're building their harbors. They're loaning them millions and billions of dollars. And it's very interesting that in the midst of this, they have a geopolitical understanding of how they can close off waterways, how they control harbors, and they can control geopolitical maneuvering across the globe. Now, bear with me here. The communists, people don't recognize that the horrible Asian flu of 1957, 1958, when I was a kid, its origin was China. Mao told his people, do not let the world know it originated in China. And then we had the Hong Kong flu of 1968. Its origin was China. The communist Chinese lied about that. And then we had SARS of 2002, 2004. Take a guess what the origin was. It was China. You see, there's a theme going on here. And the theme is very interesting because in 2019, there was biological research going on at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And we know that Senator Rand Paul and many others have caught Dr. Fauci in lie upon lie about what they were doing at that institute. How American dollars were actually being invested in an institute that was involved in biological research and warfare. One of the top Chinese generals who escaped that country and came to America wrote books about how the communist Chinese are actually planning to, in some form or fashion, use biological warfare as a form of warfare to, in essence, cripple many across the world. Now, let's go back to 2019. When the virus starts to spread, and I know I had a student from Wuhan, China, who was telling me around Christmas time that her parents were talking about a horrible pneumonia that was spreading through her city. And then when we came back from Christmas break, some of my other Chinese students telling me in mid-January there was something gone awry in communist China, but they were told not to say very much about it. They were always afraid about communication with information going back and forth through texting, etc. And it's interesting because the Chinese New Year started on January 25th of 2020, and literally hundreds of thousands of Chinese were coming to San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and they were going around the world like Milano, Italia, to Italy. One of the Belt and Road geopolitical roads the Chinese are doing when it comes to ports, when it comes to influence. And it's not a coincidence that literally hundreds of thousands of Italians were dying from the China virus, from the CCP virus. When you put all of this together, the evil nature of Maoism, of Chinese communism, of Chinese socialism, when you put together their manipulation of biological warfare, when you put together the spy balloons in the country, and Biden didn't do diddly squat about that. The spies implanted in our universities. When you put together the buying up land in Florida, South Dakota, Iowa, and across the country, when you put together, and by the way, near military bases, when you put together the stealing of technology, the control of raw materials for electric vehicles. They are laughing that Joe Biden has destroyed American energy in 1,000 different ways while they got coal burning facilities exploding. They got nuclear facilities exploding because they recognize you run an army on energy. And you run a nation on energy. And right now in the United States of America, we have inflationary prices going on in a grocery store, at the gas station. The American middle class is being decimated, because of what Joe Biden has done. And in the meantime, the communist Chinese are expanding and growing and growing and growing like never before. And don't kid yourself that the United Nations and the World Economic Forum and the Agenda 2030, they absolutely understand what is happening. That's why now, my fellow Americans, now more than ever before, we need a strong commander-in-chief in 2024. I don't know who God's going to have in store for us, but I do pray that he or she have the resolve, have the strength of character to look the communist Chinese in the eye and say, not on our watch will you get away with your diabolical, demonic, communistic activity. We will keep America free. So my fellow Americans, until we meet again, please don't forget to subscribe to One Nation through Freedom Project Media. God bless you and Godspeed.